I'm just going to quickly start with sort of who I am, where I come from, my background, to give you a sense of where this talk is going to come from. So my first degree is in psychology. We'll talk a lot about psychology as we go along. I have a postgrad cert in higher education teaching. I have a master's in educational leadership. I have a master of laws in corporate governance and public policy. I have an MBA with a focus in entrepreneurship, and I have a doctorate in leadership policy and organizations. Right? I've been waiting for that response my whole life, okay? See, the problem is my sister has a doctorate in neuroscience. She's an actual brain surgeon, so you see, so it all sort of, you see. So I'm telling you that for the primary reason of a lot of what we're going to talk about today is going to cut across psychology. It's going to cut across organizational design, which is essentially what corporate governance is about. It's going to talk about development, which is about what education is supposed to be about. So it's going to cut across a bunch of different things. It doesn't just sit in one area, okay? The other thing I'll say as I start is I will make all these slides available to anyone who wants them. I'll post them on my Twitter. Oh, I started there. I'll post them on my Twitter feed, on my LinkedIn feed, and if you want them, you can just email me, and I'm happy to email them to you as well. If you go to the GSB, the University of Cape Town's Graduate School of Business, if you go to the website and look for Timothy London, don't call me Timothy. It means I broke something and you're my mother, okay? That's what that means. Tim is fine. But on the website, I'm Timothy London. Just send me an email. I'm happy to email them to you as well. So it's always ego gratifying to see people take pictures. So if you want to do that, feel free. But I'll also make all of that available to anyone who wants them, again, on those feeds or by email. So we're going to talk a little bit. We're going to talk mostly about other people, okay? We're going to talk about hiring people, developing people, how do we pick those people. But really, where all of this starts is with you, okay? So this is the reality we need to come with. All of us who manage people, the ones we complain about, a good part of the reason you're complaining about them is actually you, okay? So a lot of this comes back to, yes, them, but what do we do? How do we play a role in that? So we'll talk about values. It starts with your values. So everyone has values. All of you have values. How aware you are of them is a different question. But those values are there, and they're what shape how we view the world. They're essentially like the spectacles you're wearing, okay? They don't fit anyone else. They just fit you. That's how you see the world. It's how you interpret the world. It shapes everything that we do. We're at our most effective when we're in a place that allows us to live those values, okay? So there's a lot of research around what's called face work, which is I have to pretend to be someone else to succeed in this space. So to put a fine point on it, women, if you want to be on boards, boards are male-dominated. So a lot of women, they feel like if they need to be on a board, they need to act like a man, right? So they can't be who they are. They need to do some face work and pretend to be someone else. If you're a person of color and you're in an incredibly white space, you might feel like you need to act white to be in that space. And because all of you are smart, all of you can do that. The issue is it's incredibly mentally taxing to think like that. It's incredibly soul-destroying to think that what I am is not good enough. I have to be something else. So a lot of this research is actually done with children going to school and them figuring out, okay, when I leave the house, I'm this, but by the time I get to school, I need to be someone else. And I always say to people, just as a silly example, pretend if you had to go through the world pretending to have a Norwegian accent, right? Everything you said had to have a Norwegian accent. You would go, well, how do I say that with a Norwegian? And you wouldn't talk as much, right? Because you're probably going to mess it up. And you would say less because you're afraid to get caught out, right? So imagine going through your whole career like that. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say something because it's the wrong thing. And that's the issue that we have in a lot of these cases. So again, you need to know who you are, put yourself in that position, and we'll talk about that for other people as well. If you define your values solely through yourself, you can be a manager, you can be an administrator, you cannot be an effective leader. Leadership is inherently not about you, okay? So you need to know your own values, but you need to use those to connect to other people and understand them. If it's only about you, you can't be a leader. You can have a leadership title, you can have a leadership position, but you cannot be an effective leader. Does that make sense to folks? Having the title is one thing, and it's nice. But that doesn't make you a good leader. It just puts you in a leadership position. What we'll talk about today is 3 things that are different but get mushed up together, and it's problematic. So one of them is purpose. Purpose is why you're here. So there's an individual purpose. Why are you here? So my individual purpose is creating learning to make the world a better place. That is why I think I'm on this planet. I might be wrong, but that's why I think I'm here. Okay? So that's my why, that's my purpose. As an organization, you need to have a purpose. Why are we here collectively? You need to have values. What is most important to us? We need to know that for ourselves, and we need to know that for the organization. In this organization, the most important things are respect, integrity. Whatever those are, you need to know what those are. That's what's most important to us here. The third thing you need is a mission. The mission is how you do what you do to accomplish your purpose. In the absence of purpose and values as an organization, which most of you are probably in organizations that do not have a clear purpose, do not have clear values, in the absence of those, what you're left with is mission, and all you fixate on is, how do I do what I do? And that's all I can do. And that is a very good way to be obsolete very quickly. Okay? So we're going to talk today mostly about purpose and values. The mission will come from that. We're going to talk about purpose, why, and the values, what's most important to us. Cool. So, my colleague who's sitting in the front row very nicely, she's going to give me affirmations. She promised she's going to give me the smiles and nods. Okay, cool. Talked about Economy 4.0, Industrial Revolution 4.0. Basically, we're talking about this growth that is not linear, that is not a small curve, that is dramatic change in how things work. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, all these words that we probably hear and read about and know this much about. So we say it and then hope no one asks us a follow-up question, right? Artificial intelligence, that's a huge challenge for us coming up. And everyone goes, yes, yes. And everyone's thinking, oh, God, please don't ask how. Because I just know AI. I just know AI. Quantum computing, yeah, it's a very challenging, dynamic environment. All right, that's all I know. So we're getting to a place, though, where actually we've had technology interfere with our jobs in the past, but it tended to be more for manual labor. So they'd come in the assembly line, that type of stuff. What we're now seeing is that technology is coming in and taking the quote-unquote white-collar jobs, the knowledge economy, the places where you used to think you needed a person to do that. A robot can put together a machine, but you need a person to really interact. And what we're finding is we don't need people for that anyway, or at least not people in the same way. And that's a scary thing, because it was fine when it's hurting people that are not like us. We're sort of more comfortable with that. When it starts to come for our jobs, that's when our antenna go up, right? Oh, the machines are coming for us now. Now we're concerned, okay? So what we're looking for in that type of environment is increasingly the old hierarchical models that most of your organizations have, where you report up. There's 4 reporting to 1, who's a group of 4 who reports to 1. All that type of thing where you start out in marketing and you finish in marketing, that's starting to disappear. My guess is in the next 10 to 15 years, if your organization is still built like that, it's probably obsolete, if it's not already. Depends on your industry. So you can pretend it's worked fine, and we'll talk about how we fix it on the past. You can pretend everything's fine, and that's you're right, but you're probably wrong. And you're going to find out very quickly that that's problematic for you. So the part of this that has changed slightly is the expectations from your workers are different now. So it's not that there's a lot of focus on, well, millennials want this, and then Generation Z wants this. What they want is what everyone's wanted. They're just the first generations that have felt like they can actually ask for it. Right? My dad is 73. He wants to work in a place where he can make choices, where he's engaged, where he's involved, but he never thought that he could ask for it. It's not that he didn't want it. He just didn't think it was an option for him. So now we're increasing generations where they go, yeah, I want this. I want to be engaged. What are you about? And they want to know that. And the research is on this. They'll pay more for those products and services that align with their values, and they want to work for companies that align with their values, and they're being explicit about that. The challenge for most of our organizations is they don't know what their own organizational values are, so it's hard to have that conversations. I don't mean to skip over this, but growing inequality in society. South Africa has the worst Gini coefficient. The gap between the haves and the have-nots has the worst Gini coefficient in the world. So it's 0.65. America is 0.35. The UK is 0.45. So South Africa is in a very bad place in that way, but it's not like it's the only one that's really struggling with this. So this is an increasing reality we're facing. So 3 key building blocks to any organization: structure, culture, people. We're going to fixate on people, but the reason we're going to fixate on people is because they bring your structures to life or not, and they bring your culture to life or not. Okay? So we're going to focus on people, but it's those 3 key pieces of any organization that exist. If you want to be healthy, and I've defined healthy up there, sustainable, it means you have a mix of safety, stability, that it's not chaos in there, but also dynamism, that you have the opportunities for innovation, for growth, for change. How do you balance those things out? If you go too far to the safety side, you're stuck in the mud, the world is going to pass you by. You go too far to the dynamism side, you've got chaos, nothing ever gets done. So you're trying to find that sweet spot for your organization. The way we're going to talk about that today is the best way to reach that, in my opinion, is to have a clear sense of organizational purpose. Why are we all here? And values. What is most important to us here? That's how you start to pull those things together so you get that right mix. So warm up your raising hand. Do this, get a little warmth, okay? So how many of you know the values of the organization you currently work in? Show of hands. Cool, okay. How many of you think you know what those values actually mean? Okay, a few less hands. How many of you think it means the same thing to you as it means to everyone else in the organization? There's a half hand, brave. Hand, right? So you see the numbers go down and down and down, right? So everyone goes, yeah, it's respect, integrity, yeah, I know that. And it's like, well, what do they mean? And then you get half hands, you get these hands. Kinda. You think everyone else knows them? No, I don't know. We never talk about it, right? So this is the challenge. Everyone's got it on their website. And that's a good thing to have. I'm not saying you shouldn't have that, but that's generally where it lives. It lives in the website. Not enough, not good enough, okay? So this is one of the challenges most of faces. Everyone goes, oh no, we've got those values. But no one knows what they are, no one knows what they mean. They're irrelevant, they're useless, you're kidding yourselves. I'm a bit blunt, I'm sorry. I was born in America, so I'm blaming it on that, okay? So they're just not useful, but the illusion is that they're there, and so we believe they're there, and so we think everything is fine. So number one thing I say to people is find out what your organization's purpose and values are. And people go, intellectually, yeah, that totally makes sense. And then they go, but there's no way I'm doing that back at work. And there's a reason why we don't do that, because we're freaked out about what we'll find out about. So I'm one of those terrible, stupid people who, when your knee starts to hurt, you just sort of go, I'm sure it'll get better. People go to the doctor. No, I'm sure it'll get better. Because in my head, it's probably fine. If I go to the doctor, they might know what's really wrong with it, and it might be serious. I don't want to know that, right? So what we do is we say we should go back. We should totally fix that. Yeah, but it's not important. We'll do it. And we don't do that because we're afraid we'll find out how sort of misaligned it is. So we're not going to go into the explicits of all that simply because I don't have the time. But one of the things I would say is you need to take it seriously. You need to go back and ask those questions. But here's one of the most challenging things you'll find is you've got a lot of people who are there who, if you can finally come and agree on what a shared purpose and value is for your organization, you're going to have a big bunch of people who don't fit that. And you're all probably in HR and you're thinking, I don't want to deal with that headache. And I wouldn't want to deal with that headache either. But that's the reality behind, again, are we going to get there or are we going to stick where we are? So with those people, there'll be ones who can adapt and the ones who won't. And again, every organization should have roughly 5 to 10% turnover per year. You want to be very selective about who's leaving and why, and who's staying and why. And use your 5 to 10% on those people who say, I know our purpose is this and our values are that, and I don't fit in with that. That's the person you want to get rid of. What you don't want to lose are the people who, yeah, I'd like to do that, but these jerks next to me are pushing me out. That's who you don't want to lose, okay? You want to be selective about who you're losing. So most of us have organizations that have values or purpose statements. Sometimes they're called vision statements or principles, or we have lots of different names for them. Usually they're really interesting. We aspire to create an environment where everyone can live their best lives and replenish the soul of humanity with, I don't know what that means. It reads great. I love those. They're interesting. Means nothing to me. I don't know what to do with that on Monday. Am I replenishing the souls of humanity right now? I can't tell, right? So it needs to be written down in a way that people can read and engage with and go, I know what that means, okay? Most of us have these generic ones. They sound great. They mean nothing. They're useless. They're useless, okay? So you need to start with figuring out bones of contention, which is what's most important to us. And that's a super awkward conversation. Because the normal conversations we have in the office are, how are you? To which we all say, fine. How was your weekend? Great. Right? These are not meaningful interactions. they're important. You know, it's nice if you stop having any interactions. That's a sign of a problem, right? If you go, how's your weekend? Shut up is a problem. That's a bigger problem. But we're not really getting it. So it needs to start having these real conversations. What's most important to you as a person? That's an important question. That's an important answer to get. But we don't have those conversations because it's super awkward. So the example I was using is if you're sitting on the bus or the train and someone sits next to you, the first thing you do is you eye roll. I mean, there's a million seats. You got to sit right next to me, right? That's the first response. Your second response is, okay, it's fine. If that person turns to you and says, hey, do you know what my core values are as a human being? Right? Whatever the next stop is your stop, right? Oh, boy, I got to do this. I'd love to have this conversation. I got to go. I got to get off here. Wherever here is fine, right? If someone gets on and has how was your weekend, you sort of go, it was sort of fine. It's those awkward conversations we have on the planes and things like that where the person sitting next to you can't escape them, so you're sort of like, what do you do? I'm in HR. Oh, that's interesting. And it doesn't really mean anything, right? So you have to start having conversations that are real. They're awkward. They're uncomfortable. If you don't have them, you assume. So there's a bunch of research on how cultures develop in organizations. What they say is they start with the base level as artifacts, the things you can see, the structures, which we'll talk about. So what do you see up on the walls? Are people's offices' doors open or closed? Right? All that stuff that we see, that's the lowest level of culture. The middle level of culture is values, where we talk about values. What's important to us? What are we engaged with? What drives us? That's an important conversation. The highest level of culture is assumption, where you don't have to have the conversation anymore about values because you assume that everyone, if you're here, you're on board. You can just assume that. The most dangerous place most organizations are is that they assume that they've already had those conversations and they have not. So we walk around assuming that everyone in this space agrees with my values, it knows my values, we have shared values, and that's not true. And that's a dangerous place to be. Okay? So you need to have these tough conversations. For bigger organizations in particular, but even for smaller organizations, start small. You can't have a setting like this and go, tell me about what's most important to you. Because that's not only super weird, even for me, it's just not a convenient space. It's not an accessible space. It's not going to work. So you need to have smaller groups. Get them into groups of 4 and 5. What are your values? What are your values as a group, a team, a division, as an individual? Start to have these conversations. Most of you are probably, how many of you have a culture survey at some point in your organization? Show of hands, right? Every year or 2 years or something like that? For the most part, what happens is nothing, right? So when the next year you're there and they come around, here's your culture survey, you think, well, why am I going to take this seriously? You obviously don't take it seriously. Nothing's changed, and so we don't take it seriously, and so we don't move on. So you need to have these conversations. They need to lead to tangible actions that you tell people. Leadership should not happen in the dark. I had a session not too long ago, and someone said, what do you mean, just tell them what I'm trying to do? Yes! Don't hope that they figure it out. Tell them. The culture survey told us that we're a bunch of jerks. We've said we don't want to be jerks. Here's the thing we're doing to be less jerky. That's what you need to do. You need to show people what's important. Highlight that for them. So when I start, what do I start with? My degrees. Part of that is to give you a sense of where I'm coming from. A part of that is also, I have now just changed your perception of who I am as a human being. Ooh, all those degrees, he must be smart. I'm going to listen. You don't know if I did a good job in those degrees. You don't know if I cheated through finance and economics. You don't know. You don't even know if I have the degrees. I just said it. Right? But it changes how you look at me. Right? I'm going to listen to this guy. He must know what he's talking about. I don't know what I'm talking about. I do know a little bit about it. But so that's what you want. You want to explicit. This is what I'm going to highlight what I want you to see. Okay? So for most of us, we highlight KPIs, which we'll talk about, and we'll get to that in a second. Figure out what's most important to you, highlight those things, get people to fixate on those. If you don't, they'll pick millions of different things, you'll be all over the place, you're never going to get anything done, okay? So, organizational values should be on your website, but they need to be clearly stated, they need to be understood, and they need to be actioned. And that's the bit where most of us as organizations, we fail. We don't action them, we talk about them. Most of you probably in your organization, somewhere on the walls, have a little plaque or some signs that say, here's our values. And everyone walks by them every day, and that is what they do. They're essentially holding up that bite of the wall. It saved you some paint, because now you don't have to paint that bit, right? That's all it's doing. It needs to be action. So we talk about espoused values. This is what we say. They need to be the same as your enacted values. This is what we do. If there's a difference, people will worry about not what you say, but what you do. Saying your values are respect, integrity, whatever, and being a jerk, people don't care what you say, they care about what you do. Pretending that they're listening to you, saying, I really respect you, you idiot. Right? They're going to go, no, you clearly don't. You think I'm an idiot, and it doesn't work that way. So we need to enact these values. Most of us in organizations, we have people who are there, and they are complying. You are getting the minimum from them. Lots of research says roughly you're getting about 30% of your people are engaged with their work. 30%. If you are not engaged with your work, you are existing in a space, you're not getting the most out of that person. They're the ones who are really good at Facebook. When you come by their office, they look busy at work. If you could actually see their screen, they're, going through their timeline. They're there, but they're not there. So that's what we know about tons of organizations. People are disengaged. Disengaged people are incredibly unproductive. And that's the reality. We've got people who are employed who are giving us basically no value to us as an organization, or very little value as an organization, because they're doing work that is meaningless to them, and they're in a space that treats them as if they're meaningless. So of course, why would I perform highly in those spaces? So the bit we focus on is the easy bit. The easy bit is structure. The reason why we focus on this is because it is easy and it is easily within our control. If you're a manager, if you're a director, if you're a vice president, you have control over these things. You can do them literally with the stroke of a pen, if people still use pens. Stroke of a key, I should probably say. A swipe of an app, perhaps. Right? That's why we like them. It makes us feel like we're making an impact. Well, we've just changed the rule, so everything's fine now. Go back to what I said before. Rules are only as good, structures are only good as the people who put them into action. Every scandal we're dealing with in South Africa right now, and around the world, so I'm just picking on South Africa at the moment, isn't because those companies didn't have good structures. They had great structures. If you looked at anyone from KPMG in here? Am I safe? No one wants to raise their hand. It might be they just want to raise their hand. I'm on to you. Okay. Let's just pick KPMG. So, KPMG has great rules and regulations. Their corporate governance, boom, top notch. That's not the problem. Their structures are great. The people putting them into action, questionable. Questionable choices there. And they created a culture for themselves that encouraged questionable behavior. And they created a culture where they encouraged people don't have to actively be involved in the bad deeds, but what they do is they look the other way. So one of the stories about KPMG that came out was the Sun City wedding. That was me. A junior auditor, there's a story, it doesn't come out anymore. There was a story. The junior auditor noted, hey, wait a minute, there's a problem here. And he was told, in fancy words, I'm sure, to shut up. Right? So that junior auditor quickly learns, you're saying my job is this, but the reality is my job is this. You're saying this is important, but really what's most important is this. And not only have you told that junior auditor that, you've told every single junior auditor that. Right? So when I teach a class, I usually do this. I pick a victim, and I say, hey, before class, let's have a chat. Can you do me a favor and ask a question? And then I'm going to cut you down. Okay? So we have this private conversation, and so usually teach to about 70 or 80 people, and so I say, I'd love for people to engage, and I really hope this class is engaging, and you have conversations, you tell me your questions, and we're going to talk about it. Everyone's smart here, we're going to engage with each other, and say, are there any questions? And you say, yeah, I've got a question. You ask me, any question you want, right? And I go, well, that's kind of a stupid question, isn't it? I mean, I was looking for serious questions. I mean, any question I guess is fine, but I was hoping for some serious questions. Right. So all the hands that were up, are there any other questions? No, I'm good. Yeah, I think you answered it. I think you answered it earlier. I don't have that question anymore, right? I don't have to do it to everybody. I just need to do it to one. So that junior auditor gets slammed. I don't have to go and slam every junior auditor. That's going to get around. Mission accomplished. Right? And that's what we do in organizations. When we enact our values or don't enact our values, that sends a very powerful signal. You say this, but you do that. That's the thing that I'm going to pay attention to. Okay? Every time you're having a conversation as a leader, you're having a conversation with every single person. Because if we have a meeting one-on-one and I treat you like a jerk, when you walk out, you're going to have those conversations, and that's what's going to be the reality for me, right? So every conversation you have, it needs to be shared around these things. Most of us in organizations fixate on the structures. Again, how many of you have KPIs or the equivalent? Bonuses? Not as much as you'd like, but probably a bonus of some kind, okay. All of those things are structures. They're the things that encourage certain behaviors. So your KPIs tells you what to focus on. So how many of you have a KPI based on sales? Anyone? A few folks, okay. So how many of you have a KPI based on process? A few hands. Everyone should have their hand up for that. What happens if you have KPIs? I'm just thinking about my colleague Sharon McPherson's comment earlier, where she worked. We won't mention it. We won't mention any names, but where she worked. The fixation becomes on sales, on outcomes. Outcomes are important, but you start to take away attention from process. Okay, so most of our structures are geared around outcomes. What happens is you fixate on the outcomes. You stop asking about how did you get that outcome. So if you're in HR and we want to get more employees hired, we want to hire people, that's fine. There's lots of ways to do that that are good, and there's lots of ways to do that that are bad. But if all anyone asks you is, did you hire 10 people today, and they don't ask a follow-up, you're going to have pressure to just get to 10 people. And if you have to do that by saying, well, she's not very good, but she's a person, come on down, right? And if everyone goes, great, you hit your target, problem solved, and then you've got problems further and further on. So in all these structures, we need to think through, again, are we incentivizing, are we focusing on these shared values, or are we just hitting targets as individuals? Okay? It's a fundamental difference between surviving as an organization, which most organizations are in survival mode. They're making it from quarter to quarter to quarter, versus thriving. We're going to be on the cutting edge. We're going to be proactive. We're going to be setting where we want to go next. If the market turns, we're already going to know that. That's the difference between those companies. I don't know where to point. Okay, so the hardest bit, again, that we're not going to spend much time on, the hardest bit is the culture bit, because the culture bit is something you can't put your finger on. Structures are easy, that's why we like them. You change the rule in the rule book, there's the change rule, you can look at it. How many of you went to open plan seating in your office in the last 5 years or so? Anyone? Bunch of people. Yeah, right, lots of hands, always lots of hands, right. That's an easy structural change where you can go, look, now we're open plan. And I always say, what was the problem you were trying to solve? And they go, no, we were trying to be open plan. Why? I heard open plan was good. Good in what way? And see, these are the things that we're sort of, again, if your values are about communication, about equality, then all those things make sense. So you need to frame these things. Otherwise, we're just doing stuff, the expression moving the deck chairs in the Titanic. Right now, they're over here. Look how nice it looks as the ship goes down. This is a lovely view. It's not really a great way to operate as an organization. So we need to, every organization is going to have a culture, and you're going to have subcultures. It's going to happen no matter what you do. Your organization is going to develop a culture. It's going to happen. Doesn't matter. What you're trying to do is create a culture that aligns with your values. So you need to be explicit about what kind of culture are you trying to create. Do you want to create a culture of sharing, of collaboration, of development, of change? Do you want to create a culture of profit, cutthroat, performance, incentives? Both of those are fine. Seriously, both of those are fine. I know you're not supposed to say that, but both of those are fine. Be clear about what you want, though. So my pet peeve is I look at part of my job, I read through organizational websites, and I look at a couple of things. One of the most important things related to you folks is I look at job descriptions and person specifications. And I'm sure it's not you guys, but other people who work in HR, not you. Other people. They write a job description that says, we are a company. We are innovative and creative and dynamic. We're looking for the newest, freshest ideas. We're looking for what's next, not the best practice, but next practice. And you really think, yeah. And you read the person specification. Must have 15 years of experience. Must have a master's degree. Huh? What does that have to do with that? It's not that you can't be creative and innovative with a master's degree. I hope not anyway, because I got 3 of them, right? But that's a weird filtering process, right? I want a dynamic person as long as they've been working for 15 years. So I want a dynamic person who's in their 30s, which I don't get. Doesn't make any sense. But we fall into those traps. Why? Because we can quantify years of experience, right? How many years of experience? 8. Okay, that's more than 7. That makes us feel good. Irrelevant, but it makes us feel good. I went for a job once, and they said, well, we'd love to hire you, but you don't have 5 years of experience yet. And I said, I have 4. And they said, yeah, but you don't have 5. Now, the best part is this happened in a car. He was driving me to the airport. I had this long interview, and I was there driving back to the airport. And I said, oh, I'm so excited, because you can't escape. You see, we're trapped in a car. I like to make people feel awkward. Right? And I said, oh, my God, I'm so excited. And he said, why? I just told you I'm not giving you, why are you so excited? I'm like, this year is going to be amazing. And he said, why? I said, well, because right now, I don't know enough to get this job, but something magical is going to happen in the next 12 months. That's going to make me perfect for this job. I don't know what it is. But somehow, at year 4, I'm an idiot. But in year 5, something magical, I'm going to be perfect. What is it? What's going to happen? And he, it's sort of, because there's no response to that. That's stupid. But we do that a lot. So what I always say is, look, if there's a time requirement, why is there a time requirement? And there's good reasons to have a time requirement. So if you work in a business that has cycles, you're in a 6-month cycle, a 2-year cycle, you can say, I want someone who's been through 2 cycles, because I want someone who can hit the ground and know what those cycles look like. That's fine. Say that, right? If there's no reason for that, what you're saying is, I'd like to have a person in a director role who has enough gray hair that they look like they should have a director role. That's basically what you're saying. Okay? So it's thinking through, who are we filtering out? Because that's what's going to create your culture. Who sits in this room is going to create your culture. And if you tell them what you're excited about and you hire people who are also excited about that. So if you want to get an aligned culture, define it. Tell people what you want the culture to be. We want a culture of X. Whatever it is, tell people what it is. Don't let them guess. Don't make them figure it out. Just tell them, this is what we want. And if you don't want to fit into that culture, this isn't the place for you. Okay? None of us, very few of us have work in jobs that are not in other companies as well. So if you're selling insurance, if you don't fit into that insurance company, go sell insurance somewhere else. We're not saying you're a bad person. We're not saying you can't sell insurance. We're saying you don't fit in with what we're trying to do here. Okay? Save yourself that problem. Talk about it, not just at the beginning, during performance reviews. Do we discuss what our culture is, how you fit into it? When you're praising people, or when you're, you shouldn't say punishing, when you're supporting someone to develop further, talk about how that aligns to the culture and the values. You need to talk about these things. Link it to the structures, again, show people what it means, and link it to strategy. Your strategy document, how many of you have a 5-year strategy document? Anyone? A few folks. Okay, so you know that those are lies, right? Right, you're just telling yourself lies. It makes us feel good. You don't know what's going to happen in 5 years. And if you do, I need some lottery numbers now. But it makes us feel good to sort of have those 5 years plans. But again, think about your strategy. What is our strategy? What is our purpose? What are our values? So what does that mean for our strategy going forward? Okay? So again, be explicit about these things. Hiring comes second. Once you define for yourself as an organization, this is what our purpose is. This is why we're here. These are our values. This is what's most important to us. Then you start to get into, okay, so who do we hire to work here? And that moves it away from just filling job spaces, okay? So it gives you 2 better decisions at that point. When you go to hire someone, we all have to hire somebody. We're hiring for attitude and fit, and if you look at all the HR research at the moment, it's saying one of the key things you need to do is figure out what's the minimum bar of skills for a particular job that you're hiring for, a minimum. So not no skills, the minimum bar, and then hire for attitude. You're going to get more productivity, innovation, dynamism, impact out of a person with slightly less skills, but who is committed to your purpose and values, than you are to the most skilled person in the world who's just there for a paycheck. Right? Not just in the short term, but in the long term. That person that you hire that is committed to what you're about, they're going to come to you and say, you know what I need to learn? All of this stuff. And they're going to learn it. They're going to be excited about it. They're going to want to do it. They're going to say, hey, can I go on a training? That person who's highly skilled, who doesn't give a crap about this organization, when their skills are no longer relevant, and we talked about Industry 4.0, that's going to happen really quickly. When they no longer become relevant, good luck getting rid of them. Good luck getting them onto a training program, because they're smart. You hired me as an expert. You're never going to change that person, and now you're stuck. Anyone try to fire someone and wind up going through CCMA? Good times, right? So that's the problem you've just made for yourself. So again, not that skills don't matter, but skills, set the baseline level, attitude. Are they committed to what you're committed to? And you can only do that if you know what you're committed to, right? So you need to be explicit about that. Secondly, and related to that, you're hiring for growth and development as opposed to a job. So if you're hiring a junior analyst, if all you're doing is hiring a junior analyst, you're going to have a problem. You need to be thinking, I'm hiring someone for this role to fit in. How do they fit into the rest of the company? So that's, I'm going to be blunt, that stupid question you ask applicants, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Is a really stupid question. The correct question is, here's where we see you in 5 years. What do you think about that? Because their promotion growth, their growth in your organization is not really up to them. It's more about you than it is them. You're going to tell them what the promotion criteria are. You're going to either help them or hurt them. That's on you more than it is on them. So that's what we need to say. Are we hiring just to fill this role, or are we hiring for someone to be here for a long term and develop and grow and change as we change? It's a fundamentally different way of thinking about it. So we're finding more and more research that says people are choosing places to work based on values and purpose. I'm committed to this. This company is committed to that. That's where I want to work. They're making those choices more and more. If you don't have engaged employees, you're dead in the water. So again, massive productivity drop, massive engagement drop, massive increase in antisocial behavior. So those jerks in your organization, I used to be a primary school teacher a long time ago. I had hair then, that's how long ago it was. The kids who act out are not problem kids, they're kids who are genuinely bored. They're disengaged, they don't really care, they don't get it, right? So why should I really engage with this? Adults are the same, right? If you're at work and you've got nothing to do and you sort of don't like it there, you've got to pass the time somehow. You can only scroll through Facebook so many ways. You know what's kind of more entertaining? Messing with people. It's just a little more fun. So those bad actors in your organization, a lot of times you look at them and they're scared that they're going to lose their job, or they're just bored, or both. And they're just filling the time between Monday and Friday. It's trying to get through the week. Okay, and if that involves antagonizing people, so be it. So it's really important. Advertise the job, absolutely. Again, you need to know what you're getting into there, but also advertise, and this is what we're about. This is the culture we're trying to create. This is the purpose of the organization, and these are our values. Okay, be clear about that, and make sure they match. Again, if I read your job description and your person spec and they're different, one of those is a lie. So I already think I'm working for a place, I'm going to apply because I need to make some money this month, but I'm already sort of thinking they either don't know or they're lying to me. It's not a good place to start a relationship. Think of a first date. If at the end of the first date you're sort of thinking, this person is either a liar or they're an idiot, it's probably not a long, fruitful relationship. So if you start a job hire that way and say, well, you've got to figure it out. Either we're lying to you or we're kind of dumb. Welcome aboard. Right? It's not a long-term relationship you're building there, and that's really what you're trying to do. So you need to make sure you're picking the right applicant. Your selection processes, I don't know this. In many organizations, your selection processes are built on the past, and they're built on skills, which means you're fundamentally handicapping yourself from picking the right person for your particular organization, okay? So we talked about job descriptions and person specs, but this is the issue. What happens is we filter out people that we say that we want. Must have an undergraduate degree. Why? Look, I've got a lot of degrees. I'm all for education. You can learn a lot of things without paying a lot of money to a university. You should pay all the money to the GSB. I should, just in case my boss is around, I don't know. But if you get a degree, go to the GSB. But we learn lots of things in lots of other ways. So if we're looking for a piece of information, why do I need a diploma to tell me that you have that piece of information? Why don't I just ask if you have that piece of information? It's too hard, too much work, can't filter it through, so must have an undergraduate degree. And we filter out a bunch of people who would be fantastic, but we've gotten rid of them because they didn't have enough money, their parents didn't have enough money. I am the child of a middle-class family who's highly educated. I got to screw up all through high school, and I did. And I got to go to a good university. Some of that had to do with me. A lot of that had to do with just pure blind luck. So in those processes, what we're doing is filtering out people who just didn't happen to be as lucky in the circumstances they were born into, which seems cruel to me. So figure out what you really want, establish the criteria. Interviews are very good at picking people who are like the interviewers. I'll say that again. Interviews are very good at picking out people who are like the interviewers. I sit on tons of interview panels with other academics now, and I watch them pick people like them, and I think, oh my God, we're going to have more people like you. It's a concern of mine. So figure out who do you want asking those questions and what questions you ask. Again, don't stop asking stupid questions. I had an interview once, and they said, we've only got 30 minutes. We're giving 30 minutes to every interview applicant. I said, that is fine. And they did question. One of the questions, I got 30 minutes now. They're going to hire me for a job that would have me overseeing 16 people and controlling a budget of around $10 million. Not a small job. One of the questions these brilliant people decided they needed to ask in that 30 minutes was, the job hours are 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. Long pause. Okay, is my response. Their question is, what do you think about that? In my response, not out loud, in my head was, my response is, I don't want to work with you. If that's the most important thing you can think of in 30 minutes that you want to ask me, you don't know what you want. I don't want to work for you. You clearly haven't thought this through. So when you have that 1 hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is you have, what questions do you really want to know? Don't ask questions that are on their CV. If you haven't read their CV, you shouldn't be on the interview panel. Get out. You already know that. Don't ask about the past. You can read their past and what they've done. You can see their skills. It's on the CV. If you're not reading them, that's a different problem. But they're there. Ask them, what are they committed about? What are you passionate about? Why here and not the other place that sells insurance? What's so great about us? Where do you see yourself in various? Here's where we see you. What do you think about that? Ask them questions about who they are as people. That is who you're hiring. Anyone can do a job. I'm going to disagree with the guy who was before me. Behaviors do not tell you values. I can get you to change your behavior. Like that. That's why you have bonuses. That's why you have KPIs, because that's how easy it is for me to change your behavior. So easy. Getting to change someone's values is darn near impossible. If you're not committed to being respectful, and my organization is about respect, there is very little I can do to get you to become respectful. I can get you to fake it. I can get you to smile. You know that fake smile? I call it the Melania Trump smile. You know that fake when Donald looks at her and she goes, and it's technically a smile, but it's that sort of rigor mortis. And then as soon as he turns away, right? You can get people to do that. Yeah, how are you? To get people to actually respect, you can't change that. That's not going to change. Behaviors, easy. The key to that is what will happen is if you've got an even remotely good candidate in front of you, they've looked at your website, they've done some research on the company. So one of the things you'll say is, what are your values? And they'll go, you know what's so weird? They're exactly the same as your company's values. And I'll start on Monday. Right? They've just done their research, and they're just regurgitating back to you what you think they want to hear. So the second question you always ask to that is, how have you lived your values? Okay? So that's the way to sort of make sure that these are their values. Sometimes they do align, and that's great, and you don't sort of want to throw them out. There's gaming the system. So ask the question, how have you lived your values? Because that's where you'll find out. So for me, when I got hired to this job, that's when my boss asked me, what are your values? And I said, this is them. They align very closely to the organization's values, which is one of the reasons I'm working here. So the second question you asked me is, how have you lived your values? And because I've thought about this, well, because engagement, I engage as much as possible, and so that's why I'm a teacher and a learner, and I always want to engage, and I want to sit down and I want to talk to people. I want to hear what their stories are, because then I have to understand, blah, 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 blah. Because that's what your life has been about, right? You've got plenty to say about your life. If you have just looked at their website and gone, you know what? It's the same 5 as yours, just in a different order. Isn't that weird, right? Then when you say, well, how have you lived your values? They go, well, technically, sort of, that's a sign that they have just picked these from your website, right? So that's what you want to ask them. The first question, what are your values? Second question, they're going to align with yours almost always. Second question is, how have you lived them? And that'll help you figure out who they really are, where they're coming from. Ask the question. If it's important, ask them. So this is what I would say. Most of us, when we take a job, when we walk out, we know at some point before we sign the contract how much we're going to get paid, how we're going to get paid, what our bonuses are, what our vacation days are. We know these things. They're important to us. If you walk out of that and you don't know what the values are of the person who's hiring and being hired, how can you say it's important 3 years later, 5 years later? It's very hard to do that. So it needs to start from the very beginning. And I can't even go through my slides, so it's okay. So your structures need to support them. How do we support people to develop? Again, if you're hiring just for the person with the most amount of skills, you don't need to worry about this. They're just going to give you whatever they've got, sort of whenever. If you actually want to develop people, you need to have a system that does that. It can be formal or informal. So how many of you have formal coaching or mentoring programs? A few folks. How many informally mentor someone or coach someone in your own sort of capacity? A few folks. So most organizations have a mix of that, and that's fine. Okay? But again, you want to make that accessible to people. Here's how we can support you. There's a formal process. Here's the informal process. And you want to have those in place. I'm skipping through kind of fast because I'm over time, so I apologize. So they're on board. Your development reviews or your performance reviews, what do you talk about? Do you just talk about performance from the last quarter? Waste of time. You can get that on a spreadsheet. What did you struggle with? I know you hit your targets. What did you struggle with? What went well for you? What would you suggest we change? How is it the environment in which you're working, developing? That's where you want to have a development conversation, not past performance that you can see quantitatively anyway. It's a waste of time. It tells people what's really important is not how they do what they do. It's not who they are as people. It's just can they reach these certain targets. And again, that's a key way to get someone disengaged. Not that skills aren't important, but stop asking about the past. Stop focusing on skills. Start focusing on who they are as people. And that sounds fluffy, but the reality is that that's who you're hiring. You're hiring the person. And if you get a person who's committed to the values and the purpose of that organization, you are going to get so much more out of them as an organization. So even those of you who are thinking profit, 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 you're going to get way more profit out of a person who's committed and passionate and excited than you are someone who's highly skilled and does not care about the place. So it sounds fluffy. That's where you need to spend your time. Get away from skills. You can always teach new skills. Get away from the past. You're not hiring them for the past. You're hiring them for the future. Focus on who they are as people. If you can get that right as an organization, you're going to find you're much more not only sustainable in terms of being safe and secure because you've got a healthy organizational culture, but you set yourself up to be ready for whatever the next challenge is that we don't know about even yet that's going to happen in your industry or in your sector. That's my spiel. Thank you so much for joining me.